Aha, it says recording has started. Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to which is actually our sort of final meeting of the year, as it's been a funny year. So our year's now ends in September, October. Thank you very much to everyone, officers and members, for joining us. Has Kate come back? Yeah. Have we got any apologies for absence, first of all?
No apologies, Chair.
Okay, fantastic. Do we need to do a sort of roll call, or are you okay to take a register from the side?
Yeah, that's fine. I've taken it for the participant list. That's fine.
Okay, fantastic. Number 2, any disclosures of prejudicial interest? No, okay. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to the minutes of last meeting. Everyone happy they're a true record? Yeah. Sorry, I'm sort of flicking screens to move. Cyril, thank you. All okay? Anything they want to raise? Any issues out of those that's not on the agenda? Okay, easily done. Fantastic. So I shall hand over that further ado to Councillor Lewis and Martin Nichols to present the energy strategy, which we'd asked to come back as we looked at it in a sort of earlier form a couple of months ago. Obviously, we've had a bit of disruption to our work plans since then. I don't know if Andrea and Martin, if you wanted to sort of introduce it, and then we'll have a bit of discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to hand over to Martin, but I'm happy to take any questions following Martin's introduction.
Oh, I think you're still muted, Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Yeah, I'll just give you a brief overview of the cover report. Obviously, it's quite a comprehensive document, and I think probably time is best spent in dealing with any queries that members may have, rather than taking you through a document line by line. But just a couple of key principles. First one being around, apologies that we were last, I think, at this committee in February, and joined again today by Anthony Moss and Rachel Lewis, who've done all the work in the background, pulling the updated document together, for which we're very grateful. We indicated at that stage that we're working on a revised energy strategy, and that's in front of you, and subject to views and comments you may have. It would be intended then to report that on to Cabinet as part of the overall response to the Council's climate change emergency and part of its overall action plan. As we mentioned previously, the overall climate change response includes a number of key strands, and those strands really are interrelated to allow us to come up with an overall strategy dealing with the aspiration to get a net carbon zero by 2030. I think it's safe to say, and we probably outlined this previously, we have concentrated on the main direct emissions, the sort of scope 1 emissions initially. That doesn't mean we aren't working on scope 2 and scope 3. But very much we are trying to concentrate on the areas where we believe we can make the biggest difference in terms of the emissions, and also in terms of any offsetting opportunities that exist, so that we can set out a plan, and we are still aiming to try and present that plan to Council before the end of this year. So somewhat delayed from the original intention, but this is a key strand and a key aspect of that overall approach. The cover report outlines some of the developments that have taken place over the last few months, including the decision to look to implement a new solar farm, which will obviously provide some offsetting, the work that we're doing with EGNI in terms of schools, and the work that's now finally underway in terms of the refit programme, also allowing us to improve our building stock, making it more energy efficient and therefore reducing emissions. Those are some of the key principles. We also, I believe, outlined previously that to try and give the overall programme a little bit of more of an organised feel, we are intending to remove the street lighting and highway aspects and that sustainable transport element out of what is effectively a building-related energy strategy, And we're not ignoring that. We just feel it sits better separately, and therefore Tony and his colleagues can concentrate more on the direct emissions from buildings, and colleagues within our street lighting and highways team can deal then more directly in relation to the fleet and the street lighting emissions. So that would be a further piece of work that would be coming forward, and we'd be happy to bring that back to the PDC in due course. And that would then give us part of that overall jigsaw that is outlined within the report, to be able to pull each of those strands together. Finally, the strategy, obviously, which is pretty comprehensive, we hope, and we're happy to take any comments from it, is then accompanied with an action plan, and that action plan would be fluid, and we would then be happy to continue to update that and report on that as those actions are developed over the coming months and years. So, Chair, if that's okay, that's all I was going to say by way of an introduction. I'm not sure if Tony Moss wants to add anything to that, or whether the Chair is happy to just go straight into questions and queries.
I don't mind. Tony, did you want to add anything?
No, that's fine. I think Martin's outlined.
Great. I think I just have one sort of question from my perspective before I sort of open to the rest of the committee. Last time you spoke, we were sort of waiting, or have I frozen? There we are. We're waiting for Welsh Government to come back on some of the some more detailed aspects. Sorry, go for it.
It's been, sorry, Lewis, it's been delayed. The publication's been delayed.
Okay.
So we're still waiting for further information to come from Welsh Government.
Okay. Understandably, within the circumstances, considering everything else that's been going on. But that was kind of a missing piece of the puzzle, wasn't it? In terms of
yes.
what's going to be expected of us. Okay, so I've got Peter and then Terry. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, may I say I think I was very impressed by this report. It's very detailed, it's comprehensive, and it does illustrate that in the face of considerable resource difficulties, one has to say, the Council is doing a great deal to move in the direction of zero carbon emissions by 2030, and of course the Welsh Government and UK Government target for 2050. And also, of course, the Welsh Government target for annual 3% annual carbon emission reductions. Can I just comment, first of all, on net zero? Of course, net zero basically means that we endeavour to balance our carbon emissions by counteracting carbon reductions, sequestration, or whatever. And I think at the moment, our principal tool for achieving that, of course, is tree planting. And of course, that therefore must go on, must be accelerated, and so forth, as one very simple and environmentally beneficial way of moving towards the 2030 target. Renewable energy, of course, is another means supplanting carbon-based energy with fossil fuel-free energy. So that's very encouraging. But first of all, I would welcome comment on how deliverable will be that net target by 2030, given the limited tools available in terms of sequestration and so forth. And then another thought I had, if you bear with me, Chair, I was slightly confused by the references to the corporate climate change working group. In a couple of places it's referred to exactly that, the Corporate Climate Change Working Group, and in other places it's referred to as the Biodiversity and Climate Change Working Group. Now, of course, we know that a corporate plan for biodiversity, or a working group on biodiversity has been established. And I'm not quite clear whether we're talking about two different committees or the same working groups, two separate working groups or the same working group. When the Natural Environment Panel met a couple of weeks ago, one of its recommendations, which will be coming to Cabinet members, was that this group should report periodically to the Natural Environment Panel, because at the moment, presumably it can report into Cabinet, but it doesn't seem to be reporting out anywhere else. And the Natural Environment Panel took the view that a body with such a significant responsibility should be visible and should be reporting somewhere. In the past, we'd even mooted having member representation on it, and that is still something that I would like to see happen. but understand that there may be arguments against it. So I'll pause there, Chair, but those are 2 points I'd like comments on, please. Thank you.
Okay. Andrew, I think you put your hand up first. Did you and Martin want to reply to that?
Yes, thank you, Louise. Obviously, I bring Martin in to comment on the committee memberships, the working group membership and the distinctions, and also the wider engagement in terms of the plan. But in terms of tree planting and in terms of reaching net carbon for this authority, I think it is achievable. We have already made some great strides, and I know members on this committee will be aware of our tree planting programme. I'm very proud that housing are playing a part in that as well, on housing land. We've got significant amount of trees already planted, and there are plans for many more. And it's not just in one department, as members appreciate, it's across departments and directorates. And I know that highways are looking to do the same thing in other areas on council land, which is obviously easier because it's within our ownership. It would be very easy to reach beyond that target as well. For example, if we were to deliver the tidal lagoon. So I think it's important that we have an action plan that actually, for want of a better word, forces us to strive to do the best that we possibly can, not just reach a target. And so, you know, there are many things that we've done recently. For example, Cabinet passed approval for our first solar farm. We've been putting solar and renewable energy generation on council properties. We're building new council homes with renewable energy generation. And so we've set out our aspiration, but I, as a Cabinet member and as on behalf of the Cabinet across directorates, we want to try and exceed those targets wherever we possibly can, and not just set ourselves easy goals and easy aims that we can just tick and say we've done it. So I think it's important to have an action plan to set things out and to give timescales and to give the committee assurance that we're taking this very seriously. But I would like to see us to be as ambitious as we possibly can, wherever and whenever we possibly can. And we will continue to strive to do this. Thank you, Chair. I'll bring Martin in terms of the committees.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of the working group, you're absolutely right. Apologies, Peter. There's obviously a mixed terminology up there. There is only one group working on this. It was originally set up as a cross-council biodiversity working group. However, the more we looked at the detail and the membership, we were effectively looking to invite almost all of the same people when we were looking at the wider climate change aspect. Hence, the diagram on the report tries to show that interrelationship with all of those strands. So it's effectively been renamed or in transition, I suppose, been from an overall working group dealing with biodiversity and climate change. At the moment, it was set up as an officer group just to try and get to grips with some of the challenges that we have. I've got no problem in discussing governance following any reports that we take back to Cabinet as to whether we should replicate what we have in other key strands where we would have effectively a working group of officers, but then a steering group which includes members, and that allows that member overview. And I've got no problem in us considering that as the best way forward. I think we needed to get to an agreed plan before we did that, and I think we're getting quite close to that at the moment. If I may just come back on the offset, and you're absolutely right. Planting trees is one of those key aspects, as are the other areas that Councillor Lewis has outlined in terms of renewables. And we are obviously looking at progressing all of those. We are slightly hampered by the fact that Welsh Government have not stated, as has been said, their intentions as to how do we calculate what this looks like. And that was due early this year, and they, like us, have been probably preoccupied with other aspects. But a key aspect for us is whether or not the fact that we procure 100% of our electricity from green sources is in itself something that should be counted and measured towards our ability of net zero. Now, currently, Welsh Government are indicating they don't believe that to be an eligible contribution, which I think is rather unusual, given that if we're procuring electricity and other fuel sources from green sources, and they are therefore produced by renewables, why wouldn't we be able to count those towards our overall net ambitions? So that is a bit of work in progress, and we are relaying our views back to Welsh Government on that. And as soon as we have a definitive answer, then we will report that back via this forum and then on to Cabinet for Cabinet to make the call as to how do we determine what our net zero scope looks like, taking into account any of that Welsh Government advice.
Could I just first of all thank Andrea and Martin for those very encouraging and informative responses. I hope Andrea is right in her confidence. I've no reason to suppose that she isn't. So let's hope that that is the case. In terms of achieving that position of net zero or better by 2030, of course, we will have to deliver on the Welsh Government emissions reduction target of 3% or more per annum over the next 10 years or so. How far are we? Is it possible to say at the moment, how far are we as a council from net zero by 2030 in terms of the target?
Big question. Martin, you able to answer that?
I can have a stab, and I'm sure that Tony will contradict me if I got my figures wrong. On the main emissions, the baseline that we had for 18-19, and we haven't updated it for this year yet, was around about 27,500 tonnes of CO2 emissions, and they were across the main aspect of the scope 1. So the council fleet, the grey fleets are private cars people, staff use on council business, the council buildings, which is around about 18,500 and 19,000 tonnes, and street lighting, that's a further 2,200 tonnes. So 27,500 tonne. I haven't got the table in front of me that I think we might have shared with you previously, where our emissions over the last 10 years, whilst we've been participating in the Welsh Government CRC, we'd exceeded that 3% a year-on-year reduction considerably. If I recall, it was over 40% reduction on the original emissions. So we've made significant inroads on where we were. The challenge for me is that the significant portion of those emissions are within the council buildings, and over half of those emissions are within council schools. Now, on the basis of, we can talk about reducing council vehicles and greening the fleet and reducing that, which we are already doing, and we've already got the strategy for that. I think the challenge is more around being able to do the level of work in some of our schools, which many of them are of an age, which is quite difficult to make them significantly more energy efficient than they already are. The refit programme will help that. But the reality is you're not going to reduce the numbers of schools, and therefore it's probably going to be more dependent on offsetting and renewables, but there will clearly be a need to make that year-on-year reduction of at least 3% across all of those aspects. So it's quite a long way to go. We've moved a long way, but it's still an awful lot that we will need to do to get there by 2030. And it is those combinations of measures that will need to be done to get us to that sort of endpoint.
Yeah, as a final comment, if I may, Chair.
Quickly, we have got others waiting to come in. Thanks.
I know, this really is a final comment, just to say that in relation to thinking about our tree strategy, we need to try and work out just what scale of tree planting, all other things being equal, may be necessary, together with other measures, of course, to deliver at least the net zero target by 2030. But thank you very much. I will stop here so that others can come in on the debate. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to dwell because I know others are waiting to come in, but I was going to ask about the schools. They are the biggest sort of chunk, aren't they, of our emissions, and apart from putting the solar panels on it, it seems quite hard to know what we can do about some of those, especially with a lot of the old Victorian buildings and things. Okay, so I've got Terry and then Linda. Terry first.
Yeah, the question I was going to ask, I asked Andrea last week about the partnership between the City Council of Swansea and Poplar with the energy. So I know what's happening there. Just a little bit of news now. Martin might already have seen it. They've taken the hoardings and the railings down the front of the second phase on Collier's Way, and it's starting to look very nice. For information, that's all.
No, fantastic. It's good to know, because obviously those are our sort of super energy efficient housing up there, and we're all really, really proud of that. It's brilliant. Thank you. Linda. Oh, sorry, did Martin or Andrea want to respond to Terry's point?
Yes,
Linda.
if I could.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I know that Martin brought an agenda item to our regular developers forum this week. And Martin put on the agenda the Swansea Standard and our homes as power station, which our local SMEs and commercial developers were extremely interested in, and we're sharing that model with them. So it's good to see that there's local interest from construction companies, and you may well see that they are going to increase their energy efficiency performance in their properties. And that's exactly what we wanted to do, was stimulate the commercial market, as well as providing a high standard council home for people. So I just wanted to add that in, following on from Terry's comments.
Excellent, thank you. Linda.
Right, it's a comment really, and it might be a bit off the mark in a way, but we have the people in Wales are very, very sort of conscious of climate change and trees and all this. And we've got a row going on at the moment about the cycle path coming down Wales Road. We won't go into that, but I mention it because trees are going to be cut down because of the cycle path, but also because I think that there is some damage to the trees and they are decaying inside. Now, all I want to say is it's people's perception. I know that they're going to think that the trees are coming down because of the cycle path, and they probably not. But what I would like to say is, can we sort of, as I say, because of people's perception, and make sure that we know that people know that we are thinking that trees are important, and that this is not the case, that any trees lost will be rebuilt, replanted. It's just really that I just wanted to bring this up here to say, people are conscious of trees and they are enthusiastic and they're wanting trees. So just be aware of that, really. That's all I want to say.
No, I think it's definitely relevant. Martin, you put your hands up. Do you want to come back on that?
Yes, if I may, thank you, Councillor, for the question. Yeah, I won't go into the details of the scheme, but the principle, you're absolutely right. One of the aspects that we will be asking Cabinet to take a view on is more around that net tree gain, I think along the lines of what Peter has said. So what we would effectively always be doing is, if there was any reason to remove trees, we would be looking to replace them with at least as many, if not more, and of species that maximise the carbon intake. So it is very much about the messaging, because we do have to remove trees for reasons, for example, ash dieback, which are due to the condition of deterioration. But what we need to try and do is make sure that we maximise the replacement. And I think there's very much around the communications of that, to get across the message to the public that this is an important part of the Strand. It isn't obviously in today's piece, because this is very much around the buildings, but when we bring that wider piece back, which includes all of the other strands, then that needs to factor in there, and we need to make sure that message is well and truly published.
Thank you.
I think on a related note, I think it's something that we've raised before about we need to be so much better at blowing our own trumpet around the amazing work that we are doing, and our plans that we do have. And I think that's why we talked before about developing the charter and assigning sort of local organisations up to that. But obviously, COVID's got in the way of a lot of that work. So when things start to go back to normal, if they ever do, it would be good to get that sort of common strategy back on track for some of that. Terry, did you want to come back in, or is your hand still up from before? You're muted. Is that a yes?
Yeah, for Linda and others, I've often invited councillors to come up to Penderry and look at near 1,000 trees that they planted on the Minute site, plus other parts of Penlan. And I think the Kingsway is looking pretty good now with the trees that's coming up there. I'm expecting to see people, or maybe some of these students, as I mentioned earlier on, swinging from them shortly, but we'll see.
I hope not. Okay, Mary, you wanted to come in.
Thank you. Yeah, just before we stop talking about trees, everybody's favourite subject, I just want to mention for interest, I don't know if Andrea and Martin are aware of this, I have only just been made aware by a local resident of micro forests or mini forests, really densely planted, fast growing native woodland. I think it's something like 3 trees per square metre. which, yeah, I think the first one in the UK was planted in Oxfordshire back in March. If you Google it, you'll find an article about that and a slightly longer article from The Guardian going into a bit more detail. But I think that they're looking at areas the size of a tennis court to just really densely plant in some fast-growing woodland, and they're really, really great on carbon reduction. And I wonder how many little spaces like that we might have around Swansea that could be home to some really densely planted microforests.
I think I've seen the same article doing the rounds. Yeah. Did Martin, Andrew, did you want to? Have you seen that as well?
No, I haven't seen that, Chair, but it's something I will look into. I know Welsh Government are reviewing their Glastonbury woodland planting scheme and looking at opportunities to maximise the density, because they tend to certainly plant trees at a significant distance apart, and they are also native woodlands. So it'd be interesting to see whether we can make more use of the space. Thank you, Mary, for copying the link.
Oh yeah, she just.
I would echo that, and I think that we're constantly at the moment, it feels, doing a review of council-owned land, and we'll certainly take this concept into account, which could go a long way to decarbonising environments in communities. So thank you for that.
Fantastic. Anyone else got any comments or queries about the strategy, the energy strategy itself, the papers? I think they're incredibly thorough documents, and so I really appreciate the work that's got on into it, and thank you for bringing them to us. So I think is that okay with everyone? We'll draw that out into close. I think we're very happy to see that go forward. So, Andrea?
Yeah, only just to say very quickly, I just wanted to extend, Chair, my sincere thanks to Martin and to Tony, who've done an incredible amount of work on this agenda. And without them, I'm not sure quite where we'd be with the plan. They've put such an immense amount of hours into this. So I'm really grateful to them. And I'm thank you to the committee as well for taking a good hard look at the plan and the strategy. I'm very grateful to the committee members as well.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you. Yes, definitely echo that. It's obviously an awful lot of work, and it'd be really good to see how it develops. And I know the committee has previously expressed an interest in perhaps our next year's work plan looking at that sustainable transport strategy element of it, so we can and the way that it all fits in together is really, really important. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so if we move on to sort of related topic then, which is the Sustainable Development Policy. So thank you very much to Susie for joining us. We've looked at the sort of previous draft of this, and we've done a little bit of work on it in between. So Susie's going to sort of present that to us today. Thank you.
Excellent. Would you like me just to do a very brief introduction, so again you can focus on questions, or go through the report, take you through that?
Yeah, I think just an introduction will be enough. I hope.
Fantastic. Okay. Basically, as you know, Swansea's SD policies, they predate the Future Generations Act, but happily they do share the same central principle of ensuring that we meet present needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. But right now we need to update the 2012 version of the policy, basically to explain what sustainable development means in the more complex context of the Act and how that impacts our services. So we know that all public bodies use the framework set out in the Act, as does our own corporate planning process. So it makes a lot of sense to set out exactly what sustainable development means for officers, for elected members and leadership in Swansea. We already implement sustainable development really well at Swansea, but a refreshed policy will help us to really evidence this. Sometimes I think we don't get the credit, or we're not able to demonstrate the process that evidences the good work that we are doing. And more importantly, we'll get better outcomes, because it'll help services do sustainable development more consistently and at an earlier stage in the process. So the report looks at the opportunities, the benefits, takes you through the policies areas, and it's asking you as members to recommend that policy, and also recommends that it's linked to a Sustainable Development Action Plan reporting to CMT, because previous policies were linked to a similar framework. Lovely.
Sorry, sorry, I'm just chatting away then and I'm muted. So thank you very much for that. That's great. And I know that a few members have sort of emailed some comments in the interim before the meeting, and I think some of those have been taken on board into the updated draft. So I'm sorry, everything, my screen's kind of frozen and I can't see people's hands or anything anymore. Has anybody got their hand up? Like that bit of my screen has disappeared. Sorry. No, is that? Oh, sorry. No, it's right. I can see Peter has now come up. So do you want to speak, while I try and? I don't know what's going on.
Sorry.
Come in, please, Peter. No,
Sorry,
it's not
Lou.
your
I've
fault.
only just put my hand up. Just a couple of quick points, if I may. First of all, again, I think it's a very well-written document. It's very clear, plain English, wherever possible, which isn't always possible when discussing sustainable development. And I particularly like paragraph 2.2 under our vision. Sustainable development is about getting the best out of all our resources today while making sure we have plenty of resources for tomorrow, because that's really hitting at the key issue that underpinned the original concern that drove the sustainable development case really from about the 1970s onwards, in terms of concern, the Club of Rome and so forth, concern about resource depletion, resource exhaustion, and impacts on the natural environment, biodiversity, and so on. And that was in a pre-climate change era. So far we've survived, but the situation globally, of course, isn't getting any better. So it's important that we make sure that, quote, we do have, quote, plenty of resources for tomorrow. The other point I'd make is that under paragraph 4.2, areas for change at the end of the document, which obviously will have to impact into an action plan. The first of those is corporate planning. I think I know what might be intended by that as an area for change, but I just wondered whether anyone would like to comment on what might be involved with that, please. Thank you.
Okay. Susie, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. Those 7 areas for change are actually set out in statutory guidance by Welsh Government. They focused on corporate planning, which is actually where we first have addressed the Act, and most explicitly. It literally deals with our corporate plan, which now sets well-being objectives rather than just priorities. And we actually go through and look at the steps that we can take to contribute to those well-being objectives. And we actually then look at each of the 7 goals and the 5 ways of working, as well as each of those 7 areas, to look at how we are progressing and making good progress towards the achievement of sustainable development.
Yeah, because clearly, if I may, yes, governance is clearly fundamental in terms of cross-service working and so forth. I mean, we know this in the areas of climate change and biodiversity, and of course, sustainable development is the overriding way of thinking about these things. So, yeah, I thought that's what you were going to say, but thank you for saying it. Okay, thank you, Chair.
I just wanted to sort of make the point that I think it's as Peter said, a very well read and clear policy that puts sustainable development sort of front and centre of what we do. But obviously the important thing is the action plan, so it doesn't become just a policy put on the shelf, really, isn't it? And as you say, the reporting to CMT and the monitoring of that, and making sure we're sort of following through all as we go on. Anyone else wanting to go? Mary, sorry.
Thank you. Firstly, I'm interested in the timescale now for an action plan, which I know the policy does refer to, and also there was something that I noticed before, and I thought, no, that's pedantic. I'm not going to make a comment on it, but I will. We're looking at the 5 ways of working. So where exactly are we in the document? Page 3. Involvement. The importance of involving people with an interest in achieving the well-being goals. Mm-hmm. And I just think, does that just give everyone an excuse to not try and involve everyone, because they're going to presume that not everyone is interested in achieving the well-being goals, and actually we know that if they knew what they were, they would be. Everyone would be. The involvement principle is one that is, very, very close to my heart and very important, because I think that by involving people generally in all aspects of council work, we can become a more efficient and effective organisation. And I'm really wary of that being seen as some kind of a niche thing that's peculiar to this discussion of sustainable development. And actually, to achieve the change we need in sustainable development, we need the involvement principle to be embedded everywhere in council life. And I think that perhaps that little phrase isn't getting us off to the best start. So let's not give anyone any excuse to think that there's anyone who shouldn't be involved, and maybe just revise that wording. And then, yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing the action plan as well when that comes forward. Thank you.
Is that wording from the Act or something, Susie? Is it, or is
I'm afraid, yes. I'm afraid it's our friends at Welsh Government that have come up with that phrase. We can change it, of course.
I don't care.
We can change it, but it's to understand that it's a departure to the most commonly used definitions.
Can you think of something better to put, Mary, or putting Susie on the spot there?
Is it something which it would be more helpful to explain in what this means for services, or was it the actual description itself?
I think it depends how faithful we have to be in that specific table with the wording. If the wording in that table has to say what the Act says, then, you know, I would let it go. But if not, what I've always said is just the importance of involving people who are affected by our work as a public body, because actually that means everybody.
And I think that fits in very well with other, you know, the work that we've been doing on co-production and looking at the redraft of the consultation strategy and things like that. So I think, you know, that's something we can keep at the front of our minds. And
could we insert everybody, as well as, could we put the formal definition and perhaps put in brackets, you know, everybody? Would that help? Perhaps something along those lines.
Yeah, that would help.
Just everyone.
The importance of involving people with an interest in achieving the well-being goals, i.e. everybody.
No, but I think it's an important point, because if you just ask somebody on the street, are you interested in achieving the Welsh Government's council's well-being goals, they'll be like, what kind of thing. But really, if you say, well, actually, it means how we make Swansea a better place for everybody to live in, they would say, oh yeah, I'm interested in that kind of thing, wouldn't they? Okay, fantastic. Anyone else wanting to come in? Everyone's gone suddenly very quiet. I'm trying to flick back to the policy, but my screen keeps freezing. I think there were a couple of recommendations that you put on there, weren't there, Susie, that you wanted us to sort of. Oh, there we are. So one, that we approve it for further consideration, and two, that we link this to an action plan reporting to CMT. So everybody happy to agree those recommendations? Fantastic. Thank you very much, Susie, and thank you for your work and allowing us to look over this and input into it. I think as Mary said, we'll look forward to seeing the action plan if we can, if that's appropriate. And yeah, it's a great policy. It's good to be refreshed. Thank you very much. Okay, so the last item on our agenda is just a quick look at the work plan, which obviously we're at the end of our work plan. I just wanted to note that we were going to sort of take an update on our work on the Black Lives Matter motion, but we are not in a position to bring a sort of written report forward yet at this stage. So just for the committee's information, I think most people here have been involved, that we've had 2 of the informal working group meetings where we've had reports from cultural services, mainly officers, about what they sort of started looking at, and we'll be hopefully bring something forward a bit more formal for next month's meeting, because of the timings of getting it up on the agenda didn't work out for this time. But rest assured, we are working on it, and it's all going on very productively, I think, in the background. Yeah, so that's it. Also, just to note that Joe has done a fantastic summary of our work for this year. Not a formal report, so I've circulated that for anyone's information. That's sort of a draft, so perhaps that might be something that could be brought to the first meeting our next work plan, and we'll, because it just seems odd having the year finish here, doesn't it? But that's the end, I think. So just wanted to thank everyone on the committee for their participation, and especially to all the officers, to Joe Portwood particularly for being our support officer, and Kate from Democratic Services, and legal officers who've joined us, Sally, etc. So thank you very much. I think we've had a good year.
See you at 6.
See you at 6. Well, Labour members will see you at 6. Here we've got a Labour group meeting. So I'll bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much.
Ta-da.